The Ghost Signal. The Vexian Empire had ruled the stars for 3 millennia, spanning across 17 galactic arms, commanding over 10,000 worlds, and governing trillions of sentient beings from hundreds of species. The Empire stood as the undisputed master of known space. Its military might was legendary, fleets of world breakers and planet crushers that had smothered any rebellion or outside threat for 1,000 years. Its borders were secure, its enemies subdued or extinct, its dominance absolute. Or so they believed. On the furthest edge of Vexian space, outpost Helios 9 orbited a nameless red dwarf star. The station was little more than a glorified listening post, staffed by the unlucky or the disgraced. Lieutenant Kira Voss was both. Her career had stalled after questioning a superior's battle tactics during a pirate suppression mission. The pirates had been neutralized, but at the cost of an entire civilian habitat. Now she sat at her monitoring station, staring at the emptiness of deep space through sensor arrays that hadn't detected anything interesting in decades. Until today. Her console pinged softly. At first, she ignored it, assuming another space rock or radiation burst. The ping came again, more insistent. Kira glanced down and froze. Something was moving at the edge of their detection range, but the readings made no sense. "Commander Rylex," she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm picking up an anomaly in Sector 47A. Commander Rylex, a 6-limbed Corellian with mottled green skin and perpetually tired eyes, didn't even look up from his datapad. Probably another smuggler trying to avoid the trade routes. Tag it for patrol and move on. Sir, that's just it. It's not following any known trajectory, and the velocity readings are impossible." That got his attention. Rylex slithered over to her station, his lower limbs propelling him across the deck with practiced efficiency. He studied the readout, his compound eyes narrowing. "Run a diagnostic. Your equipment is malfunctioning." "Already did, sir. Twice. Whatever this is, it's real, and it's moving at approximately 47 times our fastest military vessels." Rylex's breathing sacs inflated in alarm. Nothing moves that fast in real space. Nothing. "It just did, sir, and it's headed directly toward the Korath sector." Korath sector, home to 3 major Vexian military installations and the regional governor's seat. If this was an attack, send an emergency transmission to High Command. Priority Alpha. Use my authorization code. Rylex's voice had lost all its bored indifference. "And keep tracking that object. I want to know if it so much as twitches." The signal was sent, but by then, the anomaly had already vanished from their sensors. Not slowed down, not changed course, simply disappeared, as if it had never existed. 12 hours later, Kira was summoned to a secure communication room. Inside, the holographic projection of Grand Admiral Thoris Vex himself, direct descendant of the Empire's founder and current military supreme commander, hovered in the center of the room. His 4 eyes, characteristic of the ruling Vexian species, fixed on her with predatory intensity. "Lieutenant Voss," his voice rumbled through the speakers, "explain exactly what you saw." Kira stood at rigid attention. "Sir, the object appeared at the edge of our detection range, traveling at approximately 47 times the speed of our fastest known vessels. It maintained a direct course toward the Korath sector for approximately 6 minutes before disappearing from our sensors. It emitted no identifiable energy signature, responded to no hailing frequencies, and showed no signs of conventional propulsion." The Grand Admiral's upper set of eyes narrowed. "And you're certain your equipment was functioning correctly?" "Yes, sir." 3 separate diagnostics confirmed it. A long silence followed. Then, "Lieutenant, this information is now classified at the highest level. You will speak of it to no one, not even your commander." "Sir, may I ask what?" "You may not ask anything, Lieutenant. Continue your duties as normal. Vex out." The transmission ended, leaving Kira alone with her confusion. But she didn't have long to dwell on it. 3 days later, military installation Korath 2 went dark. No distress call. No battle. One moment it was there, a fortress housing over 20,000 personnel and hundreds of warships. And the next, all communications ceased. The Empire dispatched its finest battle group to investigate. Led by the dreadnought Inevitable Dominance, 12 capital ships arrived at Korath II to find nothing. Not destruction, not debris. The entire installation, along with the small moon it had been built into, was simply gone. In its place hung only empty space and a single pulsing beacon broadcasting on a frequency no Vexian system was designed to receive. When finally decoded, the message contained just 5 words. "We remember what you forgot." Fear spread through the Empire like a virus. Military alerts were issued, defense grids activated. Citizens were told to remain calm while warships mobilized in numbers not seen since the last Great War 1,000 years ago. On 17 more worlds, similar beacons appeared simultaneously, each broadcasting the same message. None could be traced. None could be silenced. They simply hung in space, pulsing their enigmatic warning. And then came the whispers. It started with the Empire's vast information network. Random data points began changing. Historical records flickered and revealed hidden text before reverting to normal. Communication channels picked up ghostly voices speaking a language that made the universal translator stutter and fail. The mighty machines of the Empire, the computers, the automated factories, the defensive arrays, began to hesitate. Just microsecond pauses, but enough to notice. Kira noticed something else. As the only one who had originally detected the anomaly, she was transferred to Central Intelligence on the Empire's throne world, Vexia Prime. There, buried in mountains of data, she found a pattern. Each system affected by the mysterious phenomena shared one commonality. They had all been sites of conflict during the Purge Wars a millennium ago. The Purge Wars were barely mentioned in official history, a brief, brutal campaign against a primitive species that had resisted imperial expansion. The records stated they had been completely eradicated, their homeworld reduced to asteroid debris, their colonies sterilized, their very name expunged from imperial memory. But Kira found gaps in the records. Inconsistencies in troop deployments, missing battle reports, and most tellingly, a standing order issued every 50 years to scan specific regions of empty space for signs of activity. Regions far from trade routes or valuable resources. Someone had been watching for something, expecting something, fearing something. When she brought her findings to her new superior, Director Malik Zorn, she expected dismissal. Instead, the old Vexian looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Come with me, Lieutenant," he said quietly. "There's something you need to see." Deep beneath the intelligence headquarters lay a vault that required Zorn's genetic signature, voice print, and a complex series of passwords to access. Inside, preserved in stasis fields, hung artifacts Kira had never seen before, technology unlike anything the Empire produced. Curved, organic designs, interfaces that seemed to respond to thought rather than touch. These were recovered after the Purge Wars, Zorn explained, his voice hushed despite their isolation. Remnants of a species officially recorded as extinct. What were they called? Kira asked, drawn to a strange device that seemed to shimmer with internal light. They had many names for themselves, but we knew them as the Terrans. Zorn activated a holographic display. Bipedal mammals from a water-rich world they called Earth. Physiologically unremarkable, technologically primitive. But the hologram showed creatures that looked somewhat like Nixians, but without fur or external sensory appendages. They stood on 2 legs, had 2 arms, and faces that seemed oddly expressive. But what? But they were dangerous in ways we couldn't quantify. They fought like nothing we'd ever encountered, not just with weapons, but with ideas, with adaptability. When we destroyed their fleets, they built new ones using our own salvage technology. When we blocked their communications, they created new languages overnight that our systems couldn't decode. When we thought we had them cornered, they would simply vanish, only to strike where we least expected. Kira stared at the hologram. The creatures didn't look particularly threatening. So what happened to them? Zorn's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of discomfort among Vexians. Officially, they were eradicated. Their homeworld was destroyed by our planet-killer weapons. Their colonies were systematically cleansed. Their technology was confiscated and studied, then destroyed. Their very existence was deemed too dangerous to remember, so they were erased from public record. And unofficially, the director turned to face her directly. Unofficially, Lieutenant Voss, we never found all of them. Some escaped, small groups on experimental ships. We hunted them for centuries, but eventually, the search was abandoned. They were assumed to have died in the void or succumbed to resource deprivation. After all, how could a handful of refugees survive, let alone pose a threat to the Empire? A cold feeling settled in Kira's stomach. The anomaly I detected is moving exactly like the experimental Terran ships did in the final days of the war. Impossible speeds, unpredictable trajectories, complete sensor evasion. But that was 1,000 years ago. Even if some escaped, how could they? An alarm blared through the facility, cutting her off. Zorn's communication implant chirped, and his expression shifted to one of naked fear. It's happening again. Korath 4 has gone dark. And this time, there was a message. He looked at Kira with all 4 eyes wide. It said, "The children of Earth have awakened. The debt will be paid." As if responding to those words, the artifacts around them suddenly hummed to life. The strange devices, dormant for a millennium, began to glow and pulse in rhythm. Patterns of light danced across their surfaces, forming symbols Kira couldn't understand but somehow recognize as language. Zorn staggered back. Impossible. They're completely isolated from any network. But the evidence was before them. The Terran technology was awakening, responding to some signal they couldn't detect. And as Kira watched, the symbols coalesced into Imperial script, forming words that made her blood run cold. We never forgot. We never died. We only waited. And now, we have returned. Across the Empire, on 10,000 worlds, the message repeated, in every computer, on every screen. In every communication device, the children of a supposedly extinct species were announcing their return, and the Vexian Empire, mighty and eternal, trembled at the prospect of facing an enemy they had failed to destroy, an enemy that had spent 1,000 years preparing for this moment. The reckoning had begun. The awakening. The Vexian Empire had never known true panic. Individual worlds had faced crises, natural disasters, rebellions, plague outbreaks, but the Empire itself had remained unshakable for millennia. Now, for the first time in living memory, the ruling Pentarchy gathered in emergency session, their usual pomp and ceremony abandoned. Grand Admiral Thoris Vex strode into the ancient chamber carved from the living crystal of Vexia Prime's central mountain. His uniform bore the marks of 3 sleepless cycles, wrinkled and stained with the blue-black secretions Vexians produced when stressed. "The situation continues to deteriorate," he announced without preamble. 17 more installations have gone silent. The anomalous ship, or ships, we cannot be certain, continue to evade our detection until they wish to be seen, and the incursions into our information networks grow more aggressive by the hour. High Counselor Nestra, the eldest of the Pentarchy, leaned forward on her hover throne. Her scales had long ago faded from vibrant red to pale pink with age, but her 4 eyes remained sharp and calculating. "Is it true, Admiral? Have the Terrans returned?" The chamber fell silent. The name itself was forbidden in such hallowed halls. "The evidence suggests it is possible," Vex admitted reluctantly. "The technology signature matches archives from the Purge Wars. The communications we've intercepted contain linguistic patterns consistent with known Terran dialects, and the targets chosen are all places where we enacted the most severe measures against them, finished Counselor Razak, the youngest member of the Pentarchy. "This is retribution." "Impossible," huffed Counselor Dren, his neck frills expanding in agitation. "Even if some escaped our purge, how could they threaten us now? They were primitives, barely able to achieve system-wide travel when we crushed them. A millennium in isolation would have reduced them to savagery, not advancement." From the shadows at the edge of the chamber stepped a figure few recognized: Admiral Lizarek Krell. Unlike most high-ranking military leaders who were of Vexian bloodlines, Krell was a Cenavian, a species known for their analytical minds and perfect memory. Her appointment to admiralty had raised eyebrows, but her tactical brilliance quickly silenced critics. With respect, honored counselors, her voice was smooth, measured. "I believe we fundamentally misunderstood the Terrans during our first encounter, and that misunderstanding may have doomed us." Counselor Dren's neck frills flared wider. Admiral Krell was not invited to this session. "I invited her," Grand Admiral Vex countered. "She has been studying the Terran archives extensively since the first anomaly appeared." Krell moved to the center of the chamber, her silver skin reflecting the crystal light. "The historical record shows that we encountered the Terrans during their early spacefaring period. We judged them by their technology, which was indeed primitive by our standards. But technology is not the only measure of advancement." She activated a holographic display, showing scenes from the ancient war. Terran vessels, crewed by Imperial standards, nevertheless executing maneuvers that confounded Vexian battle doctrine. Terran soldiers, physically weaker than most Imperial troops, adapting tactics mid-battle in ways the rigid Imperial command structure couldn't match. "They were adaptable in ways we weren't," Krell continued. "While our technological advancement came through millennia of incremental improvements, theirs came in revolutionary leaps. In the brief span of the war, they went from being unable to leave their own system to developing drives that could evade our most advanced sensors." High Counselor Nestra's eyes narrowed. "What are you suggesting, Admiral?" "I'm suggesting that if some escaped, if they found refuge somewhere beyond our reach, they would not have stagnated or regressed. They would have evolved, adapted, and most importantly, remembered." The chamber erupted in voices, some dismissive, some alarmed. Amid the chaos, Kira Voss, now promoted to commander after her discoveries, entered with Director Zorn. They carried a secure data module that silenced the room when activated. "This transmission was received 30 minutes ago," Zorn said gravely. "It bypassed all security protocols and appeared simultaneously on every command screen in Imperial space. The hologram showed a being that resembled the ancient Terran records, but different. Taller, with skin that seemed to shimmer with subtle patterns beneath the surface. Its eyes held an inner light that was decidedly non-biological. People of the Vexian Empire, it spoke in perfect Imperial language. I am Emissary Thorn of the Terran Collective. After 1,000 years of watching from the shadows, we have determined that direct communication is now necessary. Your leaders know what crimes were committed against our ancestors. They know what was stolen from us. We do not seek your destruction, only acknowledgement, restitution, and guarantee that such atrocities will never again be sanctioned by your civilization." The being paused, and the light in its eyes intensified. "Our vessel, Genesis, will arrive at Vexia Prime in exactly 12 hours. A delegation of 7 will teleport to your Pentarchy chamber. Any attempt to prevent this meeting or to harm our delegates will be considered an act of war, a war you cannot win. We await your response, though it will not change our arrival." The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. Teleportation. Counselor Razak whispered, awe and fear mingling in his voice. "That's theoretically impossible." As was their propulsion system, Admiral Krell noted dryly. "I believe we should prepare to receive them rather than test their other capabilities." Grand Admiral Vex's scales had darkened to a deep navy, a sign of extreme stress in Vexians. "We have planetary shields, orbital defenses, which have proven useless against their technology," Krell interrupted. 7 outposts with similar defenses are now simply gone. Not destroyed, removed from existence in ways our science cannot explain. High Counselor Nestra raised a gnarled hand for silence. What do you recommend, Admiral Krell? Honesty, diplomacy, and preparation for a fundamental shift in the order of our galaxy. Exactly 12 hours later, the strange vessel appeared in orbit around Vexia Prime. Unlike the sleek, angular designs of Imperial ships, the Genesis was a massive sphere of what appeared to be flowing liquid metal, constantly shifting and reforming. It defied all known principles of starship design, having no visible engines, weapons, or even external sensors. It simply existed, a perfect globe hanging in space, twice the size of the largest Imperial dreadnought. The orbital defense grid targeted it automatically, but commanders quickly ordered a stand-down. No one wanted to discover what would happen if they fired upon it. In the Pentarchy chamber, security forces stood at rigid attention, though all present knew they could do little if the Terran's technology was as advanced as it appeared. The 5 counselors sat on their ancient thrones, with Grand Admiral Vex, Admiral Krell, Director Zorn, and Commander Voss standing nearby. Exactly at the appointed time, 7 columns of light appeared in the center of the chamber. They solidified into bipedal forms, recognizably Terran in basic shape, but clearly evolved far beyond their ancestors. 6 were like the emissary from the transmission, tall, with shimmer skin and luminous eyes. They wore no obvious protection or weapons, only simple garments of material that seemed to flow like liquid and catch light like crystal. But the 7th was different, smaller, frailer looking, with wrinkled skin and white hair, but Terran as they had once been, unmodified by whatever changes the others had embraced. This being stepped forward, supported by a simple walking stick. "I am Elder Koshiro," the unmodified Terran said, voice scratchy with age. "I was born on New Terra in exile, but I am of the bloodline of Earth. I am the last living Terran who was taught by those who actually remembered our homeworld. I have come to speak for the dead." High Counselor Nestra inclined her head slightly. "We receive you in peace, Elder Koshiro." "I know who you all are," the old Terran interrupted. "We have been watching for centuries, listening, learning, waiting for the right moment." One of the modified Terrans, the emissary from the transmission, stepped forward. "I am Emissary Thorn. While Elder Koshiro represents our past, I represent our future. We are not the primitive species you attempted to eradicate a millennium ago." "Then what are you?" Admiral Vex demanded, his military bearing overcoming diplomatic caution. Thorn smiled, an expression that somehow seemed both genuine and unnervingly alien. "We are what necessity made us. When your empire drove our ancestors from their homes, they fled with nothing but experimental ships and desperate hope. They found refuge in the dark spaces between galaxies, in regions your sensors could not penetrate. The void between galaxies is uninhabitable," Director Zorn objected. "No resources, no energy sources. For you, perhaps," Thorn replied. "But necessity drove innovation. We learned to harvest energy directly from the quantum vacuum. We engineered new biological forms that could thrive in environments you would find impossible. We developed technologies based on principles your science has not yet discovered." Elder Koshiro thumped his walking stick on the crystal floor. "But we never forgot. Every child born in exile was taught the names of the worlds we lost, the names of those who died, the crimes committed against a species whose only sin was defending its right to exist." Admiral Krell stepped forward, her silver skin almost matching the shimmer of the modified Terrans. "What do you want from us?" "Vengeance, territory, resources, justice," Elder Koshiro said simply. Emissary Thorn elaborated. "We want formal acknowledgement of the attempted genocide, reparations for the worlds destroyed, and most importantly, we want the truth taught throughout your empire. No more erasing history, no more pretending we never existed. And if we refuse," Counselor Dren challenged, his neck frills fully extended in a display of dominance that looked pathetic next to the quiet confidence of the Terrans. Another of the modified Terrans stepped forward, this one's skin patterned with what looked like circuitry. Then we demonstrate why that would be unwise. At some unseen signal, every piece of technology in the chamber, from the ancient throne mechanisms to the counselor's personal devices, shut down simultaneously. Throughout the palace, throughout the city, throughout the planet, everything with a power source simply stopped. 3 seconds later, it all reactivated as if nothing had happened. That was a planetary demonstration. The circuit-skinned Terran explained. We could have made it permanent. We could have done this to every world in your empire simultaneously. We did not, because we are not you. We do not destroy civilizations simply because we can. The implication hung in the air, heavier than gravity. High Counselor Nestra, oldest and wisest of the Pentarchy, slowly rose from her throne and did something unprecedented in imperial history. She descended the 7 steps to stand on the same level as the visitors. 1,000 years ago, the Vexian Empire committed an atrocity, she said, her voice steady despite her age. We sought to erase an entire species because we feared what we did not understand, because your adaptability threatened our rigid order, because your potential outshone our stagnation. She turned to face her fellow counselors. We have built our millennium of peace on a foundation of genocide. We hid this truth even from ourselves. And now, that truth has returned to face us. Elder Koshiro nodded, eyes glistening with unshed tears. I did not expect acknowledgement so readily. I am old enough to have read the uncensored histories before they were purged, Nestra replied. I have carried that knowledge, that shame, for 2 centuries. Grand Admiral Vex stepped forward, his military bearing now tempered with humility. The Empire cannot change its past, but perhaps it can atone for it. What would justice look like, in practical terms? Emissary Thorn gestured, and a holographic map of the galaxy appeared between them. Certain regions illuminated, mostly along the galactic rim, and in the spaces between spiral arms. These areas for our exclusive development, open exchange of scientific knowledge, formal apology and reparations for the worlds destroyed, and complete integration of accurate historical records into your educational systems. And in return, Admiral Krell asked. Peace, Elder Koshiro said simply. A chance for both our civilizations to move forward without the shadow of the past hanging over us. A chance for my generation to die knowing our ancestors' suffering was acknowledged. Kira Voss, who had been silent throughout the exchange, suddenly understood something fundamental. You could have destroyed us at any time, couldn't you? That's what happened to the missing outposts. They weren't attacked. They were relocated. A demonstration of power, not destruction. Emissary Thorn turned those luminous eyes toward her. Very perceptive, Commander Voss. Yes, we could have. But vengeance is not our way. We wanted you to remember Earth not because we sought to punish you, but because forgetting led to your crime in the first place. Those who erase history are doomed to commit its worst mistakes. Another of the modified Terrans spoke, this one with skin that rippled like water. Your missing outposts and their personnel are unharmed, merely displaced to a pocket dimension. They will be returned once our agreement is formalized. The Pentarchy chamber fell silent as the magnitude of what was happening sank in. This was not merely first contact with a species thought extinct. This was not merely a diplomatic negotiation. This was the moment the Vexian Empire, spanning 17 galactic arms, commanding over 10,000 worlds, governing trillions of sentient beings, realized it was no longer the dominant power in the galaxy. We will need to consult with our full government, Counselor Razak said carefully. Of course, Emissary Thorn replied. We have waited 1,000 years. We can wait a little longer for you to come to terms with the new reality. As the Terran delegation prepared to depart, Elder Koshiro approached Commander Voss directly. You were the first to see us, the old Terran said, studying her with eyes that, despite their age, missed nothing. The first to recognize the patterns, the first to question the official history. Kira struggled to find words. "I just did my duty." Koshiro smiled, a warm, genuine expression that somehow bridged the vast gulf between their species. "That is what my ancestors said when they launched the last ships from a dying Earth, that they were just doing their duty to ensure humanity survived. Sometimes, duty changes everything." The Terrans departed as they had arrived, in columns of light that defied Imperial physics. But they left behind a galaxy forever changed. In the days that followed, the Empire began the painful process of confronting its past. Records were unsealed, histories rewritten to include the truth rather than propaganda. The missing outposts returned exactly as promised, their personnel confused but unharmed. And on Vexia Prime, in a small garden rarely visited by the Imperial elite, Commander Kira Voss sat beside Admiral Lizara Krell, watching the twin suns set. "Do you think they'll keep their word?" Kira asked. "About peaceful coexistence." Krell's silver skin reflected the fading light. "I believe they will, provided we keep ours. They've had 1,000 years to plan their revenge, yet they chose reconciliation instead. That speaks to a wisdom our empire could learn from." "It's strange," Kira mused. "A week ago, I was a disgraced lieutenant on a forgotten outpost. Now I've witnessed the most significant event in Imperial history." "History often pivots on the smallest moments," Krell replied. One sensor operator noticing an anomaly. One intelligence director preserving forbidden artifacts. One elder carrying the memory of a lost world. In the darkening sky above, new stars appeared, not natural stars, but Terran vessels emerging from wherever they had hidden for a millennium. They'd formed a constellation unlike any seen before, a pattern that seemed to pulse with life and purpose. The message was clear to anyone who looked up. The children of Earth had returned, transformed by exile, empowered by necessity, tempered by memory. And the galaxy would never be the same. The Vexian Empire had ruled the stars for 3 millennia. Now it would learn to share them.